Well, good morning.
Glad to see everybody here this morning. A lot of papers underneath here.
So I was born
In 1988, and so I was not around in the early to mid 60s. Which, by the way, I saw a video the other day where they were going around the street and asking young people, at what point are you old? And like every single young person says, "Oh, well, if you're born in the 1900s, you're just ancient." And then it dawned on me, I'm starting to be the old guy. And my mother very lovingly reminded me yesterday that I'm going to be turning 37 in February. That's just one step closer to 40. And Dad, I'm really sorry, but I remember when you turned 40, we were eating at that Mexican restaurant in Miami, Oklahoma, and they had all the black balloons and everything. And I just remember thinking as a kid, it's like, my dad's old. And then now, look at that, I'm like just a couple of years away from that. Man. So I went around in the 60s, but I like some of that music. I like the older music. Does anybody know the band The Grateful Dead? Anybody know that band? Okay. Well, The Grateful Dead, they had quite the following, didn't they? Now, I'm not approving of their music, but they had quite the following, didn't they? What did they call you if you were a follower of, or a groupie of The Grateful Dead? A deadhead. That's exactly right. They called you a deadhead. Jesus Christ would have lots of groupies. He would have lots of followers. I want to talk about this morning that Jesus Christ doesn't want groupies. Jesus Christ doesn't want admiration. He wants dedication. If you got your Bibles with you, open them up now to Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14, and look there with me at verse 25, or beginning in verse 25. Now, in the context of Luke chapter 14, Jesus Christ has been teaching quite a lot of controversial things. And if you look there in verse 25, it says there that now great multitudes were going along with him. And he turned and said to them, so get this picture in mind. Jesus Christ has been teaching, and in Luke 14, you're quite a ways into the ministry of Christ. And so everybody knows who he is. When it says there in Luke 14:25 that great crowds were following him, there were people from all over the country who had traveled long distances to get to Jesus and to be around him and to see him and to witness him. And I'm sure a lot of people have traveled a long ways to go and see a Grateful Dead concert, but people came from all over the walks of the earth, all over the world, to come see Jesus. And so when it says there, great multitudes, great crowds, the Greek word for crowds there signifies or hints a little bit at a riot. And so get this picture in your mind. Jesus is walking along, and there's so many people following him. A monstrous, gigantic crowd that even the Greek language would hint a little bit at. There was such chaos behind him from the amount of people following that it's almost like a riot was behind him. This great crowd of people, and you can almost hear the noise. You can hear the people talking and the volume that was coming up and ascending up off of this crowd. You could probably hear them coming from a long ways away. And it says there in the text that as large crowds were following him, it says that he turned to speak to them. The Greek word for turn is literally to twist. So get this in your mind. Jesus Christ is walking along, and there's huge crowds following him. So many people that the noise and the volume would be described as a riot. And it says there that Jesus, as he's walking along, would twist and would turn to them and would speak to them. By the way, what does that mean? If they were following him, doesn't that mean that they're walking with him? Doesn't that mean that? So you got this huge crowd of people following. They're all walking together. And then when Jesus stopped and did this, you think Jesus kept walking backwards? No, Jesus twisted, turned around, and stopped. What does that mean that this great crowd of people did? They stopped. And you think the noise went away? I bet the noise went away, don't you think? And everybody turned to hear what Jesus Christ is about to say. Now get the picture in your mind. These people came from a long ways away. These people have come a long distance to come be with Jesus, to see Jesus, to hear Jesus. And could you imagine the joy in that crowd? You don't think people are just walking along, just kind of like this, following, don't you think? I bet their heads were up. I bet everybody was excited. I bet everybody was happy and they had a smile on their face. And now Jesus has stopped and turned. And now this crowd has stopped. And it's almost like there's this great hush as they wait for their Lord to speak. Look what he says. Verse 26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Jesus was walking along, and there's this great crowd of people following him. This joyous crowd that could be described as a riot. People that were so happy to see him come from long distances. And now he stops and turns to them. And a great hush comes over the crowd. And Jesus speaks to them. And don't you know they were excited to hear what he said? Until he said it. And he said, if you're going to come to me, you got to hate your mother, father, brother, sister, sons, daughters, your own life. If you don't do that, you can't be my disciple. Jesus Christ would go on to speak a lot more on the subject. But I want you to notice here that when he turns and speaks to them, he gives them two declarations, followed by two illustrations, which both point to one emphatic conclusion. Two declarations. We already have the first declaration here. He turns and looks to him and says, if anyone comes to me. If anyone comes to me. Now, the last part of that verse says, if you don't do this, you can't be my disciple. What does that tell you? That means that there's a possibility that you can come to Jesus and not be his disciple. What does come to him mean? Believe in him.
Sacrifice.
In sacrifice. That's exactly right. And that's what this whole chapter is about, by the way, John. That's exactly right. It's about sacrifice. You can come to him. You can believe in him all day. You can believe that Jesus Christ is Lord. But if you don't sacrifice, for example, a little bit of time on Sunday morning, are you his disciple? By the way, disciples go to heaven. People that just simply come to him. Jesus Christ would say, depart from me, I never knew you. Knew. When he says, I never knew you, in the Greek language, knew is to have a relationship with. He says, depart from me, I never had a relationship with you. But notice what else he says. If anyone comes to me and does not hate. Does not hate. Now hang on a second, Jesus. Hate? Well, he told us to love our neighbors, didn't he? Matthew chapter 22, verse 44. A Pharisee, a teacher, came up to him and said, Jesus Christ, what's the greatest commandment? And what did Jesus Christ say? Love the Lord your God. Love him. Love God. With all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. What did he say is second to that? Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 5:44. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus Christ would say, you've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I have said to you, love your enemies. Love your enemies. And now, Jesus Christ comes, and as he's walking down the road and twists around, turns around to address the crowd behind him and says, you don't hate your family. You can't be my disciple. What does it mean by hate? It's simply a figurative exclamation point that's put on his declaration. If you look at Matthew's account of the story, Matthew 10:37 says, he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And so that's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is not saying in Luke 14:26, hey, hate your parents. He's not saying that. It's an exclamation point to the statement. And so it means simply this. If you love your father or mother or brother or or sister or wife or children or self. More than me. He said, you cannot be my disciple. He says, it's impossible. You can't do it. We've got Christmas coming up. Christmas Eve is Tuesday. Christmas is Wednesday. What you choose to do with your time, whether you love the Lord or just simply admire Him from a distance, is going to be the difference between you being a follower of Him, those who come to Him, and a disciple of Him. And you think about that. He who does not hate or love less his father or mother. I've got great parents. They're sitting right over here. My mom and dad came down to see me for the Christmas holiday. Love them to death. Great parents. But I don't love them more than I love Jesus. I've got a wonderful wife. A beautiful wife. A great wife. A loving wife. A wife that does so many things for me. Whatever. I need a list of all the things that she does for me so I get a lot of brownie points. Great wife. I don't love her more than Jesus. I have 3 beautiful daughters. Hannah, Katie, and Abigail. But I don't love them more than Jesus. And I love myself. I have self-pride. I have confidence in myself. Not sinful pride, hopefully. But I don't love myself more than Jesus. You see, because if I did, I cannot be His disciple. It's impossible to be His disciple. And I'm here to tell you, disciples go to heaven. Jesus Christ would say to this crowd that was following after Him, y'all that are coming after me, can't do it. Unless you hate your family. Jesus doesn't want admiration. He wants dedication. That's declaration number 1. Look at declaration number 2. Look at Luke 14, verse 27. Luke 14, 27. Then he goes on to say, right after that, he says, whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Whoever carries his own cross. Isn't that interesting? We talked about this in Bible class last week, of the idea of carrying your cross. But what is the cross? It's on the screen. You can shout that if you want to. It's a death instrument. It's an execution instrument. It would be no difference in saying, take up your hangman noose and come after me. Take up your injection needle and come after me. What does that mean? It means you die to yourself. That person that you were before a Christian, that person is dead, that person is gone, and you're with Christ now. But the whole concept of there being a cross has a second meaning to it. Look at Galatians 3:13. The verse is up on the screen for you. It says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us, because it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. And what did Jesus Christ do? He hung on a tree. And so He became the curse for us. Think about it this way. In the Old West times, how did they execute people? They hung them, didn't they? When an outlaw back in the Old West was hung, did they look at that outlaw as he was being executed with admiration? Did they look at that person and, oh, there's a great man right there. What did they think of that man? They thought of him as being a curse, right? That's the point. That's the concept. That's the idea, because if you were such a low-down scoundrel to be put to death by hanging on a cross, you were a cursed man. You were like that outlaw in the Old West that everybody looked at as a cursed man. You see, that's Jesus. Here's the point. Here's what He says right here. He says, if you come after me and don't carry your cross, meaning you die to yourself and you're willing to be cursed for Him. Whoever is not willing to be cursed is not my disciple. The name, the Church of Christ, is a name that gets drugged through the mud a lot. It's a name that gets misunderstood a lot. It's a name that gets taken and used. We use the name sometimes like a denominational name. And that name sometimes can cause you to be hated by others. the name Christian, the name member of the church? How many of us have gone to school and get made fun of because we're a Christian? How many of us have ever gone out through our business life and people won't do business with us because we're a Christian? But you see, if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to become a cursed member of society for Jesus, Jesus says, you're not mine. You see, He doesn't want admiration. He wants dedication. 2 declarations, and then He gives 2 illustrations. The first one He gives is a builder. Look at the text with me. Let's read this together. Look at Luke 14. Look at verse 28 through 30. Luke 14, beginning in verse 28, says, "For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he's laid a foundation and is not able to finish it, all who observe it begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.'" In the town that we moved from, there was a man who went to go build a gas station. And that man started on that gas station and laid the foundation for the gas station, and he built the shell of it. It was a metal building. And he built the outer shell of it, but then his finances went dry. And that building is still sitting there as just an empty shell of a building. And there's the foundation. They even dug a hole to put the tank down in for the fuel tank. And I'm pretty sure it's still just an open pit. And the whole town knows it. Because there was a man who went to go do something, and before he went to go do it, he didn't make sure that he had the finances able enough to be able to complete the building. That's your spiritual life. That hollow shell of a metal building with nothing inside of it, that's your faith. If you didn't first count the cost of what it takes to be a disciple. And the illustration here speaks of what the 2 declarations. The 2 declarations, which are, you can't put your family before me. You can't put yourself before me. You must be cursed for me. Your old self has got to die for me. If you don't count that cost, you started the building, but you didn't finish it. Illustration number 2. He talks about a king. Look at verse 31. He says, "Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and take counsel whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000, 2-to-1 odds?" So he's only got 1,000 men. He's going up against somebody with 20,000 men. That's a pretty big task to undertake, isn't it? And the Greek word for counsel there means to think to the self. So he's thinking, he's reasoning with himself, thinking, this other king, I don't know, he's got 20,000, I've only got 1,000, I don't know if I can take him or not. So then, or else while the other, verse 32, or else while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. And so you see this king, what he does is as he is reasoning to himself, trying to figure out whether he is strong enough before he ever actually goes into battle. See, what he's doing is he is counting the price of lives. How many lives is this going to cost me? Is this something that I can be victorious over? You see, before you become a disciple of Christ, and not just an admirer of Christ, you got to count the cost. How much is it going to cost you? It might cost you your family. Jesus Christ would say, "I did not come to bring peace, but I came to bring a sword." For mother and father, father and son-in-law, brother and sister will be turned on one another. Jesus Christ said that himself. You've got to count the cost. Are you willing to give that up for him? Are you willing to give up your own self for him? Your life, your hobbies, everything that you have. You see, if you didn't count that, you didn't consider the price that it was going to cost for your own life to be a disciple of him. 2 declarations, 2 illustrations, which lead to and point to one emphatic conclusion. Look at Luke 14:33. The verse is up on the screen for you. So then, or your version of the text may say, therefore. Therefore. And again, when you see the word therefore, a good Bible student asks themselves the question, what is it there for? Go back. Look what it said before that, because you're going to go over the therefore bridge to what he's about to say. So he said, if you come to me, you don't hate your mother and father, brother and sister and wife and children, and yes, even yourself, you can't be my disciple. It's impossible. He said, if you come to me and don't carry your cross, if you don't pick up your cross, die yourself, if you're not willing to be cursed for me, you can't be my disciple. Gives a couple of examples. Talks about a builder who started a building, couldn't finish it. Talks about a king who, before he went out into battle, tried to figure out how many lives he was going to lose. Therefore, so then, none of you can be my disciple. Now again, paint the picture in your mind. Jesus has a follower. He's got groupies behind him, remember? He's got all those people who are admiring him, who are looking at him. They come a long ways, travel across the whole countryside to come to Jesus just to see him, just to hear him, just to be close to him. And this great crowd that's described as almost a riot from the noise coming up off the crowd, Jesus would twist, turn around, stopping everybody in their tracks. And he would tell them two declarations, two illustrations, and then he would say, therefore, none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. The Greek word for give up is to offer up. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago in the concept of offering up. Isn't it interesting how God would always demand that every sacrifice you ever gave him, he wanted it to be sacrificed up off the ground? Isn't that interesting? There's not a single sacrifice in all the Bible where God said, you can offer that sacrifice and just burn it for me there on the ground. So he says, you build an altar, you get that sacrifice up off the ground. You give it up. You offer it up. You let it get burned up like a sacrifice. Your possessions. Now this is where things get deep. This is where things get interesting. The Greek word for possessions means to exist. Isn't that interesting? To exist or to be. Even sometimes, in some Greek language, or in some other verses of your text, it means your life or lives. It's the same word that's used here in Philippians 2:6, speaking of Jesus Christ, who existing in the form of God. That's the same Greek word for possessions right here. Existing, to exist. You can reread it this way. So that none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all of his existence. Talking about in Bible class this morning. Talking about free will. Talking about God looking for people who are looking for him. For the time is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship Father in spirit and in truth. For such worshipers the Father seeks. John 4:22 and 23. You see, he seeks true worshipers. He seeks people who are looking for him. And he put a system in place where you have to read this. And you have to know this to know him. And when you read this and you know him, you quickly realize that he put a system in place that there can be nothing that stands between you and him, where he'll still allow you to come up to heaven with him. Nothing. Think about that for just a second. Isn't there something we all hang on to? It might not be your family. It might be possessions. It might be money. It might be your job. It might be your hobbies. You think about something that comes between you and doing what you ought to do. Jesus said, you can't have anything between me and you. He said, no one can be my disciple who does not give up all of his existence. Now, what I want to do, I want to spend the last couple of minutes that we have here talking about how you can do that. How do you give up all of your existence to God? Well, now I want you to turn over with me to Luke chapter 9. Look at Luke chapter 9 with me. And look at verse 23. Luke 9, 23. He was saying to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. I want you to notice that it begins there with, if anyone wishes. If anyone wishes. It begins with a decision. A decision to say, I'm not going to put anything in front of God anymore. I'm not going to let my job, I'm not going to let my work, I'm not going to let my family, I'm not going to let money come in the way between me and my God anymore. I'm going to be wholly and completely dedicated to Him. Half the problem that the church experiences is people just being half committed. Be wholly committed to Him. If anyone wishes, if anybody wants to make the decision today to be the disciple you ought to be, it begins with a decision and then a denial. If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself. Deny himself. You got to deny everything that you are. You have to disconnect yourself from Him. The Greek word for denial is the same word that was used when Peter denied the Christ 3 times. Everybody remember that story? Peter's following along at a distance. By the way, let that be a lesson for us. He was following at a distance. He should have been right there with Him. And while he was following at a distance, people began to ask him, hey, you're one of those apostles, aren't you? And Peter said, no, that's not that. Then they said, no, I recognize your speech. You got a Galilean dialect. You're one of those apostles. No, I didn't. I don't know him. And he began to curse. He said, I don't know the man. He denied Him 3 times. You see, what he was doing was he was disconnecting himself from Him. You ever been in trouble? You remember as a brother and sister? And it was your brother that might have done something, but you were there too. And then you're trying to get out of it, and you're trying to disconnect yourself from him. It's like, I wasn't there. That was all him. You're disconnecting yourself from him. That's the concept. It's a denial of self. Go back to the verse. Luke 9:23. If anyone wishes, there's a decision. To come after me, let him deny himself. Disconnect yourself from yourself and take up his cross. It involves a death. It involves a death. There's a dying to self that has to be involved. Galatians chapter 2 verse 20. I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. I am dead. I've mentioned this before in last week's Bible class. I had an old version of myself that was not Christian. I had an old version of myself that was far removed from anything religious. When I came back to Christ, I can promise you one thing. That old Justin is dead. He is buried. He is in the ground, and every now and then I got to kick dirt on him every now and then just to keep him down there. He's dead, and I'm living for something greater now. I don't live anymore. Christ lives in me. It involves a death. It involves something day to day. He says, daily. Daily take up your cross and follow me. Daily. Every single day. Not just Sunday. Not just Sunday morning. Not just Wednesday night Bible class. Not just December 25th on Christmas. Daily. Every single day. And then lastly, it involves determination. Determination. If anyone wishes, there's the decision. You've got to decide for yourself today. Are you going to be wholly committed or just half committed? To come after me, let him deny himself. There's the denial. Take up his cross. There's the death. Daily, there's the day-to-day activity. You see, it's disciples that go to heaven. Not followers. Not admirers. And I want you to notice that that's in the present tense. Meaning it's a continual state of following Him. By the way, if you go back to Luke 9, verse 23, there's two other verbs there. It says, if anyone wishes to follow me, he must take up his cross daily, deny himself. Take up and deny are in the aorist tense, meaning that there was a point in time that began, and then it continues on from there. It means that there was a time when you said, all right, from now on, I'm not letting anything come between me and my God. And then you decide right then, see, that's when you denied yourself and took up your cross. That's in the aorist tense. Follow me is in the present tense, meaning once you made that decision, you do it continually, constantly. Jesus Christ does not want admirers. Jesus Christ wants disciples. He wants people that are dedicated to Him. He doesn't want people who only think about His birth once a year. He wants people that think about His death and burial and resurrection every single Sunday, every single day. He doesn't want a crowd of people that are following Him and happy and joyous just to be with Him, but they're not really dedicated. They're about half dedicated. He doesn't want that. That's why He stops and He turns and He twists and He turns and He looks at them and stops the whole crowd and says, if anyone comes after me, you got to set everything aside for me. Jesus Christ doesn't want admirers. He wants disciples. He wants to be your Lord. If you feel like this morning that you've just been admiring Him from a distance, if you feel like this morning that maybe you were that person in the crowd who you might have just been following along, but you weren't really there to give you all of everything that you had of, I promise you today should be that day that you decide to come after Him, to follow Him, to deny yourself, to take up your cross, and become a disciple of Jesus Christ. How you do that, by the way, is you obey Jesus Christ, you do everything He did. He's your Lord. By the way, I ask a lot of people, what does Jesus mean to you? And 99% of the time I get back, well, He's my Lord and Savior. Well, He saves you, yes. But is He your Lord? Is He your King? Is He your Master? Because if He is, you do everything He says to do. And you know what one thing He told you to do? John 3:5. Truly, truly, unless you're born of water and Spirit, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. If you want to be a follower, a disciple of Jesus Christ, you can be that this morning. The water is ready. If anybody has any need at all, please come forward now as we stand and as we sing.
It's so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take Him at His word, just to rest upon His promise, just to know, thus saith Sinking sand.